the challenge I feel like with those systems is they don't necessarily scale with the potential of the business. And so I often will use the thought experiment with customers or potential customers of where you're going to be in 18 to 24 months in a platform like that, right? You're going to be up to speed quickly. It's going to give you the ticketing. It's going to give you what you're looking for today, but it's not going to give you what you may need in 24 months.
Welcome back to Between Fires and Futures. I'm your host, Tonya Terrell, and today we're closing out season 2. And I want to start with a question. What if the most expensive decision you'll make this year already happened 3 years ago and you don't even know it yet? Most IT leaders we talk to are spending 70% of their budget just keeping the lights on. They're getting pressure from above to deploy AI, automate workflows, integrate everything. And they're sitting on a tool stack that was chosen back when fast and cheap was the smart call. It worked then, but only temporarily. Now the bill is coming due, not in dollars necessarily, definitely in capability. The thing you bought to move fast is the thing keeping you stuck today. So that's the conversation we're having today about a quiet structural problem in mid-market IT that nobody's naming out loud, and why the cheapest decision in IT is usually the most expensive one. My guest today is Corey Wisdon, VP of Services at RL Canning. Earlier in his career, Corey lived through a project that should have been a win and turned into a cautionary tale. $3 million, 3 years of commitment, and 8 months before they could even use what they bought. That experience shaped how he thinks about this entire space. So today he's helping IT leaders avoid that trap. And he's also leading work on AI adoption, which, as you'll hear, is really the same problem wearing a different costume. Corey's here to name something most IT leaders are feeling, but can't necessarily articulate yet. So, Corey, welcome to the show. So glad you're here. So we alluded to this in the intro, and I want to start here. Will you just take us back to the deployment that changed how you think about this whole thing?
Yeah, this is an example of ServiceNow and deploying that. I think that the challenge, to your point, is not ServiceNow specific. It's really around any of these large enterprise applications that organizations are trying to deploy. But in that case, to rewind the clock, it was one of my first ServiceNow deployments, and it was a pretty traditional deployment, right? You went to ServiceNow, we engaged a partner to help us with implementation. We got a quote, but we had to buy those licenses up front, commit to a 3-year deal. We had to bring in that third-party partner to do the implementation and consulting with the team to get everything stood up. And it took 8 months before we were even able to have the first user log in and get value, begin getting value off the platform. And then to kind of add more challenge to that problem, then you get in and you have users actively engaging the platform, and we began to get a backlog of requests and enhancements and changes. And so it made it even that much more difficult to get to the future that we had initially intended. And unfortunately, I have seen that happen time and time again with many enterprise application deployments. And it's something that we're trying to change at RL Canning and shift, give customers different options to where they can get the value quicker and focus on delivering the outcomes rather than getting bogged down in the minutia of trying to turn up a system or get it configured in time.
Yeah. I mean, actually, in preparation for this podcast, I did a little bit of research around this. And is it actually true? I think what I found is that enterprise deployment timelines are still 6 to 9 months before value, and they're still costing like $500,000 to $2 million in the first year. And that's that's 2025, 2026 data.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a traditional, we have a customer we're working with that actually had to do a re-implementation of ServiceNow, unfortunately, because they'd over-customized over about 9 or 10 years of use. And that took about a year just to get the new platform stood up, the new instance stood up, fully configured.
Wow.
And then you can't underestimate the organizational change management, the UAT and testing that has to happen. It's a big commitment. Even bringing in a partner to help guide you through that and run the implementation, you still have to provide those resources. You still have to provide the oversight, the decision making, and the resources to kind of wrap around it to make it successful.
Yeah. So when you talk to IT leaders running organizations, let's say like between 1,000 and 10,000 employees, what does their tool stack actually look like today, and how did they get there?
Well, unfortunately, it's very disjointed. Right? There's a lot of unitaskers. There's a lot of tools that were purchased over time. either because that's what someone was familiar with and they kind of introduced into the ecosystem for that customer, or it was they had CapEx, they wanted to invest it, and they felt that that tool would solve their problem. And this is so common, unfortunately, is organizations think that they can invest in a platform that will solve their issues. But while they put a lot of rigor up front and a lot of analysis, may go through an RFP process, tool selection, architectural review board, a lot of rigor up front, they often don't follow through with that same level of rigor when it comes to the support, the ongoing care and feeding, and making sure that they're staying on top of new features, new functions, and maximizing the potential of that platform investment for them long term. And so that's a consistent theme that we see, especially in assessments that we're doing. And so part of our common approach and a guiding principle of ours is simplicity first. And so we really try to consolidate the tool stack wherever possible. That not only makes it simpler to administer, to support, that simplifies your training for your admins and your IT teams, especially for smaller organizations, rather than trying to keep your team certified, trained, and up to speed on 8 different platforms and vendors and solutions. If you can consolidate around Microsoft Stack and enabling the full M365, which is actually one of the topics we were recording here in Chicago for a podcast this week, or ServiceNow in that ecosystem, there's so much potential to kind of streamline and integrate all of those platforms together. That makes your end user experience better. They have a single pane of glass, but also the number of vendors you're having to manage, renewals, training, all of that is much simpler and easier to manage, especially for smaller organizations.
Yeah. I mean, makes total sense. And I want to talk about the SMB and mid-market for a little bit. So that space, the SMB and mid-market ITSM space is roughly a $5 billion industry that ServiceNow basically doesn't serve, right? So why is that whole segment invisible to the big platform vendors?
I'm often surprised by this because it's an area, even Gartner research has said how big of a market space it is.
Massive, yeah.
It is. And there are some players there that do fairly well. Freshservice is one that we run into a lot. And they're great ticketing systems, right? You can get up to speed and running with them very quickly. We had a lot of Sharewell out there a number of years ago, but that's now been deprecated, and a lot of customers have actually moved to ServiceNow or our hosted solution is ServiceNow from Sharewell. But the challenge I feel like with those systems is they don't necessarily scale with the potential of the business. And so I often will use the thought experiment with customers or potential customers of where you're going to be in 18 to 24 months in a platform like that, right? Yeah. You're going to be up to speed quickly. It's going to give you the ticketing. It's going to give you what you're looking for today, but it's not going to give you what you may need in 24 months.
Right. Which goes by very fast.
Yes, which is going to be here before you know it. And so we really try to get them into an enterprise-grade platform like ServiceNow that can grow with them, does have the ability to align and consolidate tool sets into it. We can work with them on the ROI and outlining the benefit, folding in some of that functionality and giving them that cost savings. There's usually some quick wins that we can do around sunsetting the legacy ITSM platform, or we often see benefits around onboarding and offboarding automation. So customers that are still installing images through USB sticks and doing device provisioning the old-fashioned way, we can use Microsoft Intune Autopilot, integrate that with ServiceNow for automated onboarding and device provisioning, even integrating with their procurement provider to do drop shipping automatically from the system. So that's usually an area we can find cost savings immediately to kind of offset the investment in an enterprise-grade platform like ServiceNow. And then long term, we work with them to fold in those other platforms, reduce the licensing. But that's usually a longer tail, 12 to 18 months to let those contracts sunset and be able to free up that capital to invest elsewhere.
Amazing. So I'd really like to sort of walk through a real customer. You've described a pattern where teams move to a new platform, choke on go live, and then spend 12 plus months stabilizing it or having to start from scratch and never getting to the automation or integration that made them buy it in the first place. So why does that keep happening?
I think, and I'm guilty of this myself. I think when we talk about that experience that I had with that original ServiceNow deployment many years ago, we underestimated the amount of move ads and change work that just would come up, right? Reporting, oh, well, I had this button that was over here. I need this different field, or these small little modifications that are small and easy, but it really stacks up, especially when you start launching to, hundreds of users across an organization. And you need to be planning for that. You need to be ready for that and make sure that you can absorb that while also continuing on the enhancements and the long-term initiatives that you were initially going after a platform for, like ServiceNow for, whether that's launching other modules or integrating platforms or automating workflows. You need to make sure that you're kind of thinking with both hats on, and staffing and bringing in partners appropriately to support that. I think that's really an important thing, because I so often see customers that really choke on that as they get live on the platform, which we don't want to have happen, and you need to be prepared for it. I think that's the number one thing. To walk through an example to your question, we often see customers that are, I'll give you an example of one that was on Sharewell, and they were a previous ServiceNow customer. They'd been on the platform, they'd seen the potential, but they didn't have a large support staff internally. They saw it as an expensive platform that was probably more mature than they may have needed, about a 4,000 person company with a global manufacturing footprint. And they needed to move away from Sharewell because it was going end of life. So they engaged ServiceNow sales teams. They got sold a whole bunch of licenses, 500 approvers, just a whole bunch of stuff, to where they were saying, wow, look at the expense of moving to ServiceNow. And so we were able to come in as a partner. We gave them our hosted solution, which is a multi-tenant instance of ServiceNow. It's something that they actually developed for municipalities and government entities, to where each department can have its own tenant within the platform. And we use that structure to basically carve out tenants for each customer, where they can adopt best practices, things like ticket prioritization, change management policies. All of that can be adopted, and they can get a framework for best practices right out of the box. So we introduced them to that hosted solution for ServiceNow. We were able to come in and start with just a small bite. We gave them 10 fulfiller licenses, 10 users that could act as our UAT and our user acceptance testing group, and build out the entire functionality. So we got the platform live in about 45 days with our multi-tenant model. Yeah, amazing 45 days. Got it stood up, and we're able to work with them to put together a roadmap, so that over the course of the next about 9 to 10 months, we introduced new modules, new capabilities, and got them not only parity with what they had before very quickly, but we're able to launch new functionality around IT Operations Manager, monitoring, integration with Teams and SharePoint for approval workflows, a whole bunch of capabilities. And that's, to me, what's most exciting about that model is, if you can go with a partner in a hosted solution like ours at RL Canning, you're able to get to the great, exciting stuff that you went after a platform like ServiceNow more quickly. You're not bogged down by those changes, because we're going to be handling the upgrades. We're going to keep you compliant and not making changes that are going to put you at risk of lack of supportability or upgrade challenges in the future with the platform. And then we can get to the exciting stuff. And so that's a model that we've tend to use with customers, and it's been very successful, especially in that mid-market space.
Yeah, no, it sounds incredible. And I was just thinking, like, this just dawned on me, beyond everything that we talked about, like the time to value being so stretched out with a typical ServiceNow implementation, and that just the time, money, energy, resources wasted. But it also just dawned on me, like, we haven't even talked about what this is doing to the actual humans on the service desk.
Yeah.
And, I would imagine there's high turnover, high burnout. I get, teams choking on go live, never get to the cool stuff. But I can only imagine, like, those people on the service desk, they're just trying to survive that time.
Yeah, you can't lose sight of the end user experience, and what you're doing this for is to make their life easier, automate it, and you want to be able to focus on those capabilities. And I think that's something that can often get overlooked in these engagements is you need to be thinking about how you can improve their experience, automate what we can, introduce some of that nice functionality to make their lives easier. So trying to keep that in mind, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah. And so on the flip side of that, kind of walk me through, the first 18-ish months of if an IT team picks a Jira or Freshservice because it's cheap and fast.
Yeah.
What does the 18 to 24 months in look like? What does the wall actually look like when they hit it?
Yeah, I think the challenge that we see often is that it's a great ticketing system, right? But the ability to customize and really make it your own and fully align it to your business and your processes is limited. And so some of the areas that we see is you can't deploy things like the ITOM module or the SPM module in ServiceNow, which is IT Operations Manager for infrastructure monitoring and alerting, self-healing actions, service mapping, right? A lot of that capability. SPM, where you can do projects and time tracking for your project, your PMO and your project organization internally. Another big area is just platform integrations, right? ServiceNow, it's incredible the amount that you can do through Integration Hub or the spokes integration that they already come out of the box. Not to mention custom API integrations. I mean, there hasn't been anything we ran into that we couldn't integrate ServiceNow into and give users that single pane of glass. And so that flexibility to me is what separates an enterprise grade platform from one of those quick win solutions. Again, Jira is great if that's all you think you're going to need. It may get you there much more quickly, but if you want to grow and scale and you see your organization having needs beyond where they are today, getting a platform that's going to be able to flex with you, grow with you, offer those kind of single pane of glass experiences and integration potential is really, really key.
Yeah. What's the typical timeline, or is there one before, a customer of like Jira or something like that hits the wall?
I don't know if I can tell you that there's a specific time window that they do hit it. But I think that there is, we see many customers that are actually looking to migrate away from those platforms, right? They have reached kind of the end of what they can do. And it's usually around flexibility where they can't admin it or tweak it or modify it in the way that they want. We often see it around things like customer facing portals where they want to give customers access or vendors access to engage with them. Integrations with other customers' ticketing systems or procurement partners. There's limitations and potential there. And so when they get to that point, that's where they begin looking at other alternatives. And oftentimes what we'll do is work with customers to integrate with those platforms initially and then help migrate them. One of the use cases that I often like to see customers use is development teams, customers that have large DevOps or app dev resources. That's a key part of their business. They love their development platforms. That may be Azure DevOps, that may be Jira, and they're highly tied to their entire process is tied to that platform. And so in those cases, what I love about ServiceNow is we can integrate with those. We can pull it into change management within ServiceNow, give the CIO a single pane of glass in the IT leadership where they can see what changes are happening. They can approve it. They can have a consistent CAB experience from a change advisory board perspective. But then once that change is approved through CAB, it actually goes back out to those DevOps platforms, whether that's Jira or Azure DevOps, and allows the app dev folks to continue to work in their platforms. And so that's an example that we've done for customers and demonstrates, I think, the flexibility of a platform like ServiceNow, where you can have that type of agility in terms of meeting your end users and your teams at their point of need.
Yeah. And how does AI play into this space right now?
Yeah, it is. It's ever changing. I laugh because this is one of those things that I feel like we're seeing. The year of 2025 was kind of we joke that it's Copilot for all, right? It was we need an AI strategy. What can that be? I'm going to go with the easy. I'm going to get everybody Copilot at my organization. Yeah. I think I saw a study the other day from Gartner that was given the choice between ChatGPT and licensed Copilot, only 18% of employees were actually choosing Copilot. They would choose ChatGPT 72% of the time, or whatever the delta is there. So I think that's intriguing, and folks are kind of over some of the capability where if it's not wowing them, they're going to go find whatever is and kind of find some niche tool or niche AI solution that's going to meet them again at their point of need. So what I like that ServiceNow is doing is they have had Now Assist. But similar to Copilot, it was pricey. It was expensive. You were essentially paying almost the same amount as a traditional fulfiller license for that capability. And there were some nice features. There were some good efficiencies for your service desk. Incident summarization if you were transitioning between levels of a service desk. There was resolution notes that were automated. There was some basic knowledge creation that was automated. But again, those features weren't wowing customers to where it was saying, "Hey, I'm going to pay almost as much as a license for each of my resources to get that." So what they announced at Knowledge, their conference 2 weeks ago, that we had a lot of our team at, was that they're going to begin rolling and folding a lot of that AI functionality into the platform licensing after July of 2026. And so we're very excited about that because that's going to now open up that whole new potential to many customers that may have not seen the value in terms of the investment. But now as we can unlock some of that capability, whether it's natural language chat or incident summarization, and they see the value, then I think they're going to be more willing to invest in other areas of enhanced capability around AI. So ServiceNow has definitely had it. They're at the forefront. The other element that I'll mention is I like their model of, they call it control tower, but it's essentially bringing all of your AIs into one place. It's similar to what Microsoft launched with their agent oversight license, where you can actually manage all the agents, because we have seen this kind of agent sprawl, especially when it comes to Copilot, where people are creating a bunch of great agents that are out there, but they're not really well known. They're not getting out to the teams. There isn't training, and that capability is not being shared outside of that individual user. And it's not being managed or governed appropriately either from an IT leadership perspective. So ServiceNow does have some capabilities around control tower, where you can actually make it kind of your central switchboard, if you will, of your different AIs in your environment, and use it for that governance and oversight of those various tools and platforms.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I know you do, AI adoption analysis for clients. So you mentioned a third of users aren't even logging into corporate AI tools that their companies bought. So where do you see this connection between these, good enough infrastructure decisions that are actually costing companies money and time and capability now, and the AI adoption problem?
Yeah, I think we got to get back to the fundamentals of IT. I think that it sounds pretty vanilla or basic, but I think there were a lot of quick decisions, a lot of FOMO when it came to AI of, fear of missing out. I got to do something. And so they went down those quick paths and made investments quickly without applying the same rigor that we used to apply to every investment, right? What's the business case? What's the ROI? What's my time to value for the organization? You got to get back to that rigor when it comes to AI and kind of diminish the excitement and get realistic. And if you're an IT leader, be that Sherpa, be that guide for the rest of your organization around AI, and be calling out the concerns, the need for governance, the need for thoughtful and intentional action when it comes to these things. Because we've had many organizations that have launched an AI tool or even introduced Copilot, and it brought to light very quickly they did not have the proper data governance or controls in place to where folks were getting access to data or sharing data that they shouldn't really have access to. And so we've seen actually an increase in purview, need, and demand from customers. Microsoft's data governance platform that's now baked into Microsoft 365 licensing because of Copilot being introduced in those areas. So that's a big thing. But I think getting back to those fundamentals is how you kind of address this, and data-based decision making. And so like you mentioned, we use NextThink. That's another partner of ours here at R.L. Canning. And they have a solution, AI Drive, that you can use their endpoint agent to actually assess and monitor AI that's being used in an organization by the end users. And it tracks what they're using. And so far, with every customer we've deployed that capability to, we've surprised them in terms of unexpected AI that was being leveraged in their environment they weren't aware of. And so I think using a tool like that, or using the data to see how it's being used, can be very insightful in terms of where your investments need to be. And also, are you getting the ROI? So in the example you mentioned of a third of users were logging in every week to Copilot, that was for a customer that did the Copilot for all type approach, where they licensed every one of their users for Copilot, but when you actually looked at the usage data, less than a third were using it just once per week, or even logging in and using that potential. So that money that could have, that could have been invested somewhere else with a greater ROI, a greater impact. So
Right.
I always want to do data-driven decision making when it comes to IT and get back to those fundamentals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. And, I think we saw the same thing. We did the same thing with Copilot here. And I think the numbers that I saw, something like 65% of employees with provisioned Copilot licenses don't actively use it. And that was our experience here as well.
Yeah. The other thing I'll mention is you can't overlook the training. I think that's another thing that we've been surprised at, that as we survey customers and use Nexthing to do end user surveys of the usage, we find that they don't know even how to use it. How do I leverage it? What are some of the use cases? And so I think focusing on that and making sure that you have a plan for that adoption is key. Just getting it, providing it, and deploying it is not enough. You need to really guide them on how to use it appropriately. What are some good use cases, and how to safely use it, right?
Yeah.
What should be used, what shouldn't be used. And so that's another thing that I'll highlight that's a Nexthing capability that I love, is you can actually use the agent on the endpoint to do a splash screen when a customer goes to ChatGPT or goes to Claude or goes to any one of those AI platforms. You can prompt them and remind them of the corporate AI policy and give them links to those if they need a reminder, but just remind them of some of those key points of, hey, you can't upload client sensitive data or anything like that to this, and or direct them to the corporate approved platforms if there is one.
That's fantastic. So if the tooling decision, that we've been talking about is quietly determining what AI and automation you can run later, what's the question IT leaders should be asking right now when they're evaluating service desk or ITSM platforms that they're probably not asking? I'm sure, you interact with so many of these tech leaders. So what's one question they should be thinking about?
The biggest gap I feel is out there right now is having again, it sounds very basic, but having that roadmap of where you're going to be in the next 18 months, right? Let's use that analogy. I think a 3-year, 5-year roadmap, technology is going to change so much. It's not of value to be doing it that long. But having an 18-month roadmap of where you're going to go, what are your business initiatives that you're going to try to solve? Because I think so often we get into these, again, the RFP, the rigor we put into this selection process up front so often, that rigor forces us to kind of we get myopic. We just kind of focus on that one need, and we lose sight of the big picture. And I think whether it's ServiceNow, and when you're making a selection like that, and you're choosing even the SKUs and licensing that you're going to purchase, making sure you're selecting the right ones, that you're not going to outgrow those SKUs or need something different or put yourself in a bad position because you overbought, which is an unfortunate common problem that we see. You have to make sure you do that diligence up front. You know what goals you're trying to solve for, and you make those decisions that move you towards that goal. The other element to my earlier point about making sure you're not just applying the rigor up front, but you're also sustaining that long term. When you create those goals, define them and then measure against them and make sure that you achieve those or got an ROI on those outcomes. Again, it sounds basic, but so often organizations start and make an investment in a platform like ServiceNow because it's going to offer these outcomes for us. And then I see when we come back and check in with them 12 months later, they've moved on to something else, or they have another initiative, or they've gotten squirrel and gone off in a different direction, rather than keeping focused on, this is our roadmap, these were our outcomes we committed to, and yes, we followed through and we were able to deliver these.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And, I think getting back to basics is sometimes underrated, but especially now, especially when there's so many things to go squirrely about. There's so many new tools. There's so much AI, everything. Everybody's, agentic is sexy and everybody's excited about it. It's easy to get distracted. So
yeah, it's changing so rapidly, to your point. I think the two things that I would recommend customers be aware of is this agentic, the agent sprawl we talked about, right? Copilot, that's very common, but now, if you have ChatGPT for enterprise or other platforms, we see that be a consistent theme where folks are creating them and IT has no awareness or knowledge of what's being created, or that can be a double-edged sword because there's great potential that should be shared and known with the team that isn't getting out there, or there's some things that are probably created that shouldn't be created or should be properly governed. The other side of it is customers making investments in niche AI solutions. So they tried the general, hey, we'll just get ChatGPT for enterprise or Copilot for all, and that didn't meet our needs. So maybe if I go get a specific legal niche solution that does this task for me, or I go and get this thing for me, and I feel like that's a devil in different clothes over there. To go, you're now just getting a niche tool, another investment, and you're recreating the theme that we started with, where you're buying tools to try to solve an underlying process and training and cultural issue. Just be wary of that, right? Go into it with that rigor, make sure that you're making it, and that niche solution is going to achieve your long-term goals.
Yeah, that's great advice. And so for the IT leader right now who's maybe already locked into a tool that's not going to scale, right? What's the realistic move here? They can't just rip and replace. They probably can't go ask for $2 million either.
Yeah.
So, what's the realistic move?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I love about our hosted solution with ServiceNow is we have a number of customers that are in that boat, right? Right now that they've renewed in Q1 of this year for their licensing, but they know they want to move off. They need to move off. And to me, that is an opportune time, because what we can do with our model is you don't need to make that 3-year commitment in licensing. You don't need to buy all of your licenses up front. You can come to us and buy a small subset of those 10 UAT licenses. We can spend the next 8 months working with a select group of change agents in your organization to build out the functionality, do the integrations, do all the great valuable work to automate your onboarding and offboarding, integrate with your HRIS platform, integrate Intune and Enter ID, which we do for every customer on our ServiceNow instance, so they can get user information and asset information to your service desk right there in the platform without having to go to another tool. We can do all of that over the course of 6 to 8 months with minimal license costs for you. And then once the platform's proven, tested, ready, we've done all the integrations, then you come up for renewal. We can then step up your licensing, do a broad scale launch to the organization, and unlock that value to the entire company. But this is the opportune time, as I said, because you can build it, you can test it, you can make sure that it's functional. Don't wait until you're ready to move off the platform, because it is going to take time to do the deployment. While we can get the platform live in 45 days, oftentimes we want to have integrations, we want to redo the onboarding. You don't want to waste that opportunity to really add some value and efficiency to your organization through some of those capabilities that ServiceNow offers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to give a little bit of time to talk about your hosted ServiceNow offering, because until, we started working together, I didn't know that anything like this existed. And our team is talking, we talk to thousands of IT leaders day in and day out. And most of them don't know something like this exists. So because they don't know that this model is an option, it's always been the cheap, fast, and easy that's going to cost you later. You're going to hit a wall, or massive investments, very, very, very long time to value, and millions of dollars. So, this sort of answers all of those problems. So in plain language, what is it? Who's it for? And what does it actually solve? And the thing that I also want to highlight that is just a wow for me is 45 days to live in 6 to 8 months for
traditional deployment.
So tell us, what is it exactly? Who's it for?
We designed it to overcome those challenges we talked about with traditional deployment, right? It shouldn't be this difficult. Most of the things that you're setting up in a traditional deployment are mundane. It's what ticket priorities do you want? What SLAs do you want? Well, a lot of that's best practice now in table stakes. I tell customers all the time, Gartner no longer even does an ITSM Magic Quadrant because it's considered this is baseline. Everybody should have this, right? And so we've baked all that best practice in. You can still customize and tweak it to your business needs, but you're starting from a foundation that really has best practices, and then just tweaking the corners, rounding off the edges is necessary to align with your business. It's a low upfront cost. We do the initial deployments about $15,000 for a standard deployment, and it's a flat per user per month fee. And the whole intent is designed to get you into the platform quickly, not have you choke on the care and feeding. We provide all of the annual upgrades for you in the platform. They're seamless. We prevent you from getting over customized and having to re-implement. Unfortunately, that's become an epidemic with ServiceNow, where we've had numerous, probably approaching a dozen organizations we've talked to or engaged with or helped that have had to re-implement ServiceNow because they've over customized it, right? Wow. And it's just easier for them to kind of burn the boats and start fresh.
Yeah.
So that's really what it was designed for. We can support ITSM, ITOM. We give customers sub-admin roles so they can use it, do reporting, all of those features. So it's kind of the best of what ServiceNow has to offer without any of the challenges or heartburn that's conventionally there. I think the big thing that we're now seeing customers come around to is historically customers had a view of, hey, I need to have administrative rights. I want to control it. I want to have this in house. And I think we're now seeing a shift, not just with ServiceNow, but Nextthink and some of these other platforms where customers are saying this isn't core to my business, right? And it's extremely challenging. It takes a bunch of investment, time, energy, effort to stay up on top of all of these enhancements and features and sending your team to knowledge and getting them certified and having them understand best practices. And so offloading that to a partner like us that can take care of all of that, it makes it more efficient, more effective for them. And they can focus on what are the things that they want to unlock and what are the things they want to do in their roadmap utilizing the platform. So that was the whole intent of it. It's turnkey, live in 45 days. And it's been a big win for many organizations. For those that it's not, like who is it designed for, you asked? It's under 300 fulfillers. And so if you're an IT organization where you're over 300 fulfillers, it's not that we can't technically do that. We simply advise that you get a dedicated instance just because at that scale, there's likely going to be need to customize or to do things that we simply you may be limited in terms of features and functionality that we can do within the hosted platform. So it's anybody under 300 fulfillers, but that's a pretty large IT organization. I think opens it up to many organizations out there that may be on ServiceNow today, but they're up for, I need to re-implement, or I'm not seeing the value. I may move to something like a Jira or almost downgrade. That's a great solution as well. So if you thought ServiceNow was kind of outside of your pricing zone or you thought it was too expensive, let us know, reach out, and we think we have the right solution for you. Give you all the value without any of the headache.
Yeah, incredible. I'm so, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think there are so many IT leaders who have this need and just are not aware that this is an option. So I think there's just so much value there. And if you could leave our IT leaders with one belief about how they really should be making infrastructure decisions in 2026, not necessarily a tactic, but a belief, what would it be?
I would say simplicity is key. Mm-hmm. And that could mean consolidation, that could be integration, but keep it simple. I think too often, especially now in IT, we're overcomplicating things and introducing too much complexity when technology should be a simplifier and a force multiplier for the organization. So,
that's great advice for life too. It applies to IT, but it's really great advice for life. Corey, thank you. I mean, this is the kind of conversation I wish more IT leaders had access to, because it's grounded in what's actually happening in the field. And I think I was surprised to learn that this was an option. Our team is so excited to share this with the IT leaders that they're talking to who are really struggling with this decision of two almost polarized choices and none of them like meeting them where they are. So I think this is just super valuable option. And to everyone listening, I mean, this is exactly what the show exists for. So thank you for giving the conversation that actually helps IT leaders do their jobs. I think this one is a really valuable one. And for those listening, if today's conversation made you want to go deeper, you can head to technologymatch.com and search for RL Canning to see the hosted ServiceNow offering. There are also, I think, some AI offerings there. I'll link all the links in the show notes, as well as Corey. Is LinkedIn a good place to find you?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Reach out.
I'll put your LinkedIn in the show notes as well. Any other links that we should share?
Nope. That's great. You covered. You can go find us at technologymatch or allcanning.com. And if you have any questions or just want to bounce ideas off me, feel free to reach out. And thank you, Tonya. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh yeah, I mean this was great. I think it's such a huge value to our technology community, and this actually closes out season 2. So we're taking the summer off, and we'll be back in the early fall to kick off season 3. But I don't think we could have ended with a more valuable conversation. So thank you, Corey.
Awesome. Thank you.